What's up, y'all? My name is JR, and for those of you who don't already know, I'm a huge movie and TV nerd. If you're new here, I appreciate you taking the time to check out my channel. I hope you consider sticking around and joining the film community I'm trying to build here on YouTube. So in today's video, I'm going to be giving my reaction and review of Lionsgate's new horror film, The Strangers, Chapter 2. And just so you guys know, this video will contain mild spoilers, so if you haven't gotten around to going to the theater and seeing this movie yet, and you don't want to know anything that happens in it, you might want to exit this video now. And with that being said, no more wasting time. Let's get into it. The Strangers, Chapter 2 is an American-made horror film serving as the fourth film in the Stranger film series. About a couple whose car breaks down on the last day of their cross-country road trip, forcing them to take refuge in a remote Airbnb in a small town. And as night falls, three masked strangers appear and terrorize them until dawn. Now, the film serves as the second installment of a new trilogy following The Strangers Chapter 1. And the film is directed by Rennie Harlin and stars Madeline Pest with Gabriel Basso and Emma Horvath. The film had its Hollywood premiere on September 16th of this year and was released on September 26th of this year in the United States by Lionsgate Films. Now, at the time of the making of this video, the movie has a meager 17% on Rotten Tomatoes based on 29 critic reviews. And that's bad. And it does not currently have a popcorn meter just yet, but I can assure you the popcorn meter is going to be higher than 17%. So, by the end of the weekend, that should maybe balance out the critic reviews a little bit better because the film is not quite that bad. The film also has a Metascore of 30 on Metacritic based on 9 critic reviews, and it does not yet have a user score. But again, by the end of the weekend, it will, and it'll have a user score that'll balance out the critic review score a bit. And finally, the movie has just a 4.8 out of 10 on IMDb with almost 300 ratings. And even there again, I expect the 4.8 to come up a bit. So if you've been here with me long enough, then you may have seen the video I made on The Strangers Chapter 1 last summer. And if you did, then you also know that I didn't think very much about that movie. I even went so far as to question why it got made in the first place, or at the very least, why it was almost a Xerox copy of the first Strangers movie with Liv Tyler, which I view to be the much more superior film. But that's just me. Now, don't get me wrong. I understand why the movie got made, right? The same reason all these other reboots and things like that are getting made, right? To print money is basically why. But, again, me being a screenwriter and me being much more interested in narrative construction when it comes to these things, that's what I mean when I say that. But because of my feelings about the film and why there were going to be 2 more of them, I went into the theater to see this one with a sense of dread, I'll admit, because I kind of already knew what to expect. That said, I also knew I needed to bring you guys the news, so here we go. Now, after seeing this movie, I just wasn't sure what the filmmaker's goals were here, which might sound weird as hell to say, but I'm just being honest. Now, the film was fairly logistically sound, and by that I mean the characters, and essentially Maya, responded to the aggression of the strangers once they found out that she was not dead, in the ways you would expect a person to, for the most part. Something I thought was a bit different than was in the first film. And that's because this film was much more action-driven. It was out in the open. The first movie took place essentially for the most part of the film inside, the Airbnb. But this film was essentially a chase film. And so once, the strangers realized that Maya was not dead and they show up to the hospital to kind of correct, the oversight, Maya, for the most part, does what you would expect someone to do who's being chased by a trio of psychopaths who are trying to, do away with her after having failed to do so the first time. Now, the screenwriters do use a lot of flashbacks in this film, And I want you guys to stick a pin in that for now, because that's going to be important. I'm going to come back to that. But for the sake of this particular part of the video, those flashbacks do take you out of the main story a bit, but only momentarily, right? Because they tend to be short. But I think that despite critics saying that they slowed down the pace of the film, I thought this movie played pretty fast, which is one of the few things there are to place in the pro column here. There's not a whole lot, but the fact that, you know, this film kind of went by pretty quickly is a plus, in my opinion. And speaking of the main story, I thought one of the characters' response to the pressing situation throughout was where I found the film to be at its most nonsensical. And in that, I'll just say that the story got away from the writers a bit here, because there are a number of larger plot points that just don't make very much sense from a procedural standpoint, you know, which I know might sound like I'm nitpicking, but when these small issues add up, especially now over the 3 hours of the story we've gotten to this point, they start to weigh heavily on the overall narrative and even start actively working against your ability to suspend your disbelief as you're watching this story unfold. I say all that to say there was one stranger in particular that just went ham, right? And you're kind of sitting here going, so how many bodies have to drop before like state police show up? Like dead ass. Like how many people have to go missing? How many people have to disappear before somebody in Oregon just goes, hey, bro, what the hell is going on in that small town? What's happening? You know, and maybe we should go check this out. FBI something, right? And so that's what I mean when I start talking about that. Now, from a structural standpoint, I think the film fit fairly neatly into 3 acts. You know, Act 1 being what happens in the hospital, and then Act 2 being, you know, moving to the woods and beyond, and then Act 3 being, you know, what happens in the other house and moving on into the end of the film, right? So 3 acts. But I thought the screenwriters made a big narrative mistake in Act 2 involving an animal that ties directly into one of the flashbacks, a flashback that essentially unmasks one of the strangers in a way. And I thought that was a mistake, because I want you guys to imagine for a second if Jason Voorhees had just said, you know what, I'm tired of running behind this chick, right? So I'm just going to go ahead and if there's a bear I got chained up in the back, I'm going to go ahead and let that motherfucker loose real fast. You see what I'm saying? Do the work for me, you know what I'm saying? Work smarter, not harder. You feel what I'm saying? And I think that this film is a slasher. And so as a slasher, I know it's 2025, and slasher is more of a convention that came from, I mean, the 70s with Halloween up and through the 90s with Scream. But again, like I said, you know, even in Scream, you kind of go, why would you outsource the situation here, right? What makes the film scary is to have these 3 psychopaths chasing her, right? So I don't understand why you would take those people off the chessboard, even for a few minutes, and let someone else do the work for them. And that's kind of where I get into all that. I want to leave it there. I don't want to get too much into spoilers or whatnot. And, you know, even especially, you know, when you consider that there's at least one more of these movies to go until we're done with Maya's story. I think they gave away a little bit too much of the game here with an entire movie left to go. But that's just me, right? And speaking of Maya, I thought Madeline Pesh was a serviceable final girl here, right? Her Riverdale fame notwithstanding. She makes for a fairly decent scream queen, and fortunately, she didn't have to do as much talking in this one due to Ryan, you know, played by Froy Gutierrez, only appearing in flashbacks, and her going on the run solo here surprisingly helped the film in its flow, in my opinion, right? I think that if Ryan had lived, I think the film would have still been a little bit more clumsy like the first one was. But having her kind of be only responsible for her, I think made the film just flow a little bit better. I mean, just one man's opinion. Now, I thought what little dialogue there was in the film was fine. But, you know, the dialogue was never going to be a make or break issue for this film in the first place due to the fact that the strangers don't really talk. So I can't give the writers any extra credit on that front. And I also thought that the screenwriters got a little too complex with the misdirection in this one, right? again, the story kind of started to get away from a little bit. They tried to create a world in these films where anyone past preteen age could be a stranger. Almost all of the girls that appear in this movie seem to have dark hair, so as to posit them as being capable, at least, of being pinup girl. And that's done by design, of course, I understand. And the same goes for guys who are all of similar build, so that no matter their age, they could be the Scarecrow. Now, the Scarecrow is kind of, he's quick, he's agile, he's athletic. So you tend to go with somebody a little bit younger. But again, like I said, it's the misdirect here for me, right? And I don't think we've ever even seen Dollface's hair yet. I mean, if you pay attention to other Strangers films, like the first one, you assume that Dollface is a blonde. But I don't remember at any point in time in this movie especially seeing her hair. So who the hell knows, right? But so same rules apply, right? They basically create a world where you suspect any and everyone, right? And yes, that does make for a more interesting narrative, and it makes things more fraught, right? Because you go, who the heck are these people that are chasing this girl? Like, it makes it just that much more scary to not know who they are, right? But there can be a bit, it can get to a point where you can overuse that and lean on that too heavily, and I think that the writers did that here. The filmmakers also like to play fast and loose with groups of 4, even though the psycho killing frat appears to be a trio. And I say appears to be because they're all masked. I mean, hell, you never fucking know. Like, it could be 3 people, the starting 3, and then you got bench players. You see what I'm saying? Because they all wear masks. Who knows, right? But it appears to be a trio, which just further confuses an already confounding issue. And then even after that, almost everyone who's not in the group is kind of complicit in the murders that have taken place in the town over the years, because they all kind of seem to know what's up and nobody really want to say anything. Like when the police officers are eating in the diner and they go, oh yeah, Maya's not dead, everybody's ears perk up like, what? We got to fix that. You know what I'm saying? Which I think just added too much to the rather grandiose shell game the writers are already trying to manage here, especially when you realize that they'll never be able to answer all of the questions this movie poses in a final 90-minute film. I wonder if the third film is going to be longer than the first 2 films have been, because there's still so much that the movie asks of us that we have not gotten answers to yet. But the biggest WTF moment comes at the conclusion of the film, wherein, via the many flashbacks, we meet both the Scarecrow and Pinup Girl as children. And though we don't get definitive proof as to who the Scarecrow is as an adult, we are presented with a worthwhile option for a primary suspect. Though, again, this could be more misdirection, right? Again, the Scarecrow could be more than one dude. And we finally do get an answer as it pertains to who Tamara is and why Pinup Girl says it when she knocks on the door of the rustic Airbnb from the first movie. We also get she does it in the second movie too, with a different victim. We also get a major death. I won't spoil that for you guys, but we learn who Pinup Girl is in the process. Again, I'm not going to spoil that for you guys in this video, and in case some of you all are listening who haven't gone to see the movie yet. I ain't gonna break that one out. We could talk about that at a later time. And this revelation at this point in the story just didn't make a whole lot of sense to me, for one, because it's the only revelation that we actually get, and second, we still have one more of these things to sit through. And so, I just don't understand why you would unmask one of the strangers and not all of them, right? And so I just kind of go, we probably could have waited until the third movie. If I were writing these movies, I would have waited until the third movie, even if it was early on in the third movie, before I started revealing who these people actually are. I think you saved that for, the grand finale to your story. But, hey, look, that's just me, right? But this situation basically had me leaving the theater more confused about the strangers than I was when I walked into the theater. And I think that's the opposite of what should be happening at this point. I think being confused about who the strangers are and what they want is good initially. But now you have invested 3 hours, and depending on how much a movie ticket costs, maybe as much as $20 or $30 now in this story. And so now we should start being able to check things off of the list that we now know. moving forward. And that's apparently the filmmakers didn't think that was important at all. And so, the story just kind of remains really convoluted here. And what I was really hoping for in this second outing was for the story to kind of start taking some real shape here. And it did not do that for me. Though I like the fact that this story is a little more action-driven than the first one is, and we had a little bit more space to kind of spread out and kind of, enjoy, a chase film. Now, overall, I'd give this film a 60%, or a 6.0 out of 10 if you're thinking IMDb score. Essentially a D as a letter grade. Look, despite how the first film went, and this film had a chance. The first film, I think I gave it a 40%, but I've been told by lots of people I'm way too harsh, so I've kind of upgraded my grading system to kind of, spread hope. But, so I don't want you guys to get it twisted. Just because this film got a 60, I'm not saying that it's 20% better than the first film, because it's not. It's just a change in my scoring system that kind of is starting to bring the scores up some. But, like I said, the writers just crammed this with unnecessary ingredients to the point of confusing the hell out of the issue. This film successfully did the most and not enough all at the same time, and that's really, really rare thing. They were, taking us through things we didn't need to know, and then they weren't telling us things that we did need to know, and it was just kind of crazy. And while I can understand that the writers probably had a mandate to get the film to 90 minutes, right? Just as they did the first one. And that might be a part of the problem, but that just brings up two much bigger problems. One being that the first film is essentially, like I said, a Xerox copy of the original, in which case we probably could have done without it from a narrative standpoint. And the second being that even if you make room for the first film's existence, narratively speaking, that this story should be over by now. I'll always contend that them trying to make this into 3 movies was probably a bit ridiculous. This movie probably could have been 1 2-hour and 15-minute story. Let's go ahead and get in. Let's get out. We all got shit to do. You know what I mean? But I digress. I'm basically telling you guys that this film will do the trick if you're simply in the mood for an anxiety-ridden 90-minute chase film, right? If you're just here for just the basic entertainment of a girl running from 3 people that are trying to kill her, then you maybe be satisfied with this film. But if I'm being completely honest, it's not much good for much more than that. But what do you guys think? Have you had a chance to go and see The Strangers Chapter 2 yet? If you have, what did you think about Madeline Pesh's performance compared to the first movie? What did you think about the unveiling of, one of the strangers? Let me know in the comments. And for those of you that might be new to the channel, be sure to like and share this video. If you really like the content, be sure to subscribe and hit that notification bell. That way you'll be notified whenever I drop a new video. You can also now support the channel by leaving a super thanks. If you should be so inclined, I'd greatly appreciate it. Also, feel free to subscribe to my new shorts channel and my reaction and reviews channel for additional content. The link is in the description. In addition, be sure to go and check out themadscreenwriter.com for more television and film reviews and info on my upcoming film projects. And with that, I'm going to go ahead and get out of here. I got screenplays to write. And I'll catch y'all in the next video.